Joe Biden is the worst president of my lifetime and might just be the worst president in American history. Politics is full of hyperbole. Politics is full of hyperbole and partisanship. And every 4 to 8 year cycle, those that disagree with the platform or the party of the president in power find themselves thinking, we've arrived at hell in a handbasket. It couldn't possibly be worse than this. I've always had an aversion to that type of hyperbole. But the last 2 years have lived up not only to every conspiracy theory, they've lived up to everybody's exaggeration. I was born in 1975. So for the standard of worst president of my lifetime, that would mean Joe Biden would need to outpace Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump. And it's safe. Joe Biden runs across the finish line and almost laps the field for worst president of my lifetime. And I think you'll have a hard time, at least through 1 year of their tenure, finding a worse president than Joe Biden in American history. Let me explain. First, it was the no good, very bad, terrible week for President Joe Biden. On Monday, the CDC reported a record high 1.35 million new COVID cases in the United States. Cases are a relatively worthless metric. We've talked in the past that hospitalizations and even deaths have limited value because of limited trustworthiness. Still, Joe Biden was the president that promised to shut down COVID on a week where we hit record number of cases. I think it's fair to say he failed in that promise. On Wednesday, new data showed that America has experienced the highest year-over-year inflation since 1982. Inflation now well over 7%. This is something that every American, you and I, have personally experienced, whether or not it's at the gas pump, at the grocery store, or in buying a used car. Inflation is teetering on the edge of out of control. In response to the bad news gathering at his doorstep, Joe Biden gives a speech focused on quote-unquote voting rights, where he compares his political opponents to George Wallace and Bull Connor. We played for you that speech on a previous episode of the Will Cain podcast. On Wednesday, not only was that speech pilloried by Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, but by members of Joe Biden's own party. Dick Durbin said Biden may have, quote, gone a little too far in vilifying his opponents and dividing America. On Thursday, the Supreme Court, of course, blocked Joe Biden's vaccine mandate for large employers. On that very same day, Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, both Democrats, announced they would oppose Biden's voting rights proposal and would oppose changing the filibuster rule in the Senate. And then on Friday, to bring this full circle, HHS reported a record high 157,000 COVID hospitalizations. In the midst of all that, a Quinnipiac poll came out that showed Joe Biden's approval rating dropped to 33%. However, that number was really the high watermark for Biden, because among independents, Biden's approval landed at 25%. Among young people, those who are supposed to carry the banner of progressivism, Joe Biden has an approval rating, according to Quinnipiac, of 24%. And get this, among Latinos, Joe Biden's approval rating sits at 28%, down from 70%. 1 week in January that caps off a year of incompetence and malevolence. But none of that, truthfully, is why Joe Biden gets my vote as worst president of my lifetime. Instead, it's his response to this bad news. It's his response to opposition. It's his instinct to burn the house down that puts him in the conversation for worst president in American history.
For the full podcast, go to foxnewspodcast.com.